Edward Langston controlled everything in his billion-dollar world, except his 11-year-old daughter Emily, who couldn't understand the simplest algebra despite the best tutors money could buy. But when Emily wandered to the old oak tree one afternoon and found a homeless black girl drawing equations in the dirt, something shifted in the perfect order of the Langston estate. The girl was Amara, just 13, teaching physics through storytelling and math through music, making Emily laugh and learn in ways no Princeton professor ever could. Edward stormed from his balcony to remove this raggedy intruder, but stopped when he saw his daughter's face, alive with joy for the first time since her mother's death. What he didn't know, what would soon shatter everything, was that this brilliant child teaching his daughter was connected to his past in ways that would force him to choose between protecting his reputation and saving the girl whose family he'd unknowingly destroyed. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The morning sun cast long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawns of the Langston estate, where every blade of grass seemed to know its place. Edward Langston stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his home office, phone pressed to his ear, watching the gardeners trim hedges into mathematical precision. His reflection in the glass showed a man who had everything under control. Silver hair swept back, custom suit worth more than most people's cars, and eyes that calculated profit margins even when looking at roses. "I don't care what the Beijing office says," Edward spoke into his phone, his voice carrying the weight of someone who rarely heard the word no. "We launch the new software update next quarter, and that's final. Send me the revised projections by noon." He ended the call without a goodbye, already mentally shifting to his next meeting. Edward Langston had built his tech empire from nothing, or at least that's how he told the story. In truth, he'd started with $1 million loan from his father, but he'd turned it into billions through sheer determination and an unwillingness to accept anything less than perfection. From somewhere in the vast house, he heard the faint sound of a door closing. Emily, his daughter, was supposed to be in her morning mathematics session with Dr. Hartwell, the Princeton-educated tutor he'd hired for an astronomical sum. Edward glanced at his Patek Philippe watch. 10:15. The lesson should run until noon. Emily Langston was 11 years old, with her late mother's delicate features and her father's stubborn streak. She sat in what her father called the learning suite, a room filled with expensive educational technology, rare first-edition books, and charts that mapped everything from the periodic table to the timeline of human civilization. Dr. Hartwell stood at the electronic whiteboard, explaining quadratic equations with the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. "Now, Emily, if we take the coefficient here and apply the formula." "Emily, are you listening?" She wasn't. Emily stared out the window at the old oak tree that dominated the eastern garden. It was ancient, her mother had told her once, older than the house, older than the family fortune. Her mother used to sit under that tree and read to her, back when stories mattered more than equations. "I need some air," Emily announced, standing abruptly. "We're in the middle of a lesson," Dr. Hartwell protested, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Your father specifically requested." But Emily was already gone, slipping out the door with the heavy algebra textbook clutched against her chest. She knew Dr. Hartwell wouldn't follow immediately. He'd spend 5 minutes debating whether to call her father, then decide against it, hoping she'd return before anyone noticed. The oak tree stood like a guardian at the edge of the formal garden, its branches creating a natural cathedral of leaves. Emily dropped onto the grass beneath it, not caring that her expensive dress would get stained. She opened the textbook, staring at the numbers and symbols that seemed to mock her. Why did X need to be found? Why did it matter what Y equaled? The questions in the book had answers in the back, but the questions in her heart, about why she felt so alone in a house full of people, about why her father looked through her instead of at her, those had no solutions. She threw the book down in frustration, and it landed with a dull thud on the grass. "That's no way to treat a book," said a voice. Emily jumped, her heart racing. A girl stood a few feet away, partially hidden by the massive trunk of the oak. She looked about Emily's age, maybe a year older, with dark skin that seemed to glow in the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. Her clothes were worn, a faded purple t-shirt with a hole near the hem, jeans that were too short, revealing ankles above beat-up sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in neat braids, though a few strands had escaped. "Who are you?" Emily asked, more curious than afraid. "How did you get in here?" The girl stepped forward, picking up the algebra book with surprising gentleness. "Name's Amara, and your wall has a gap near the south corner, behind the rose bushes. Been using it for weeks when I need a quiet place to think." She looked at the book's cover, then at Emily. "Quadratic equations? You're what, 11? That's advanced stuff." "My father says I need to be advanced in everything," Emily replied, surprised by her own honesty. "But it doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense." Amara sat down cross-legged on the grass, gesturing for Emily to join her. She opened the book, scanning the page Emily had been struggling with. "See, that's the problem right there. They teach it all backwards, like math is some foreign language instead of something we use every day." She picked up a stick and began drawing in the dirt. "Look, forget the fancy symbols for a second. Say you're planning a party, right? You've got a budget. That's one number. You've got guests. That's another. The cake costs a certain amount per person. Decorations are a fixed cost. The equation just helps you figure out how many people you can invite without going broke." Emily leaned forward, watching as Amara transformed the abstract equation into something real, something that actually mattered. The numbers weren't just numbers anymore. They were possibilities, solutions to actual problems. "How do you know all this?" Emily asked. "Do you go to Pemberton Academy too?" Amara laughed, but there was no humor in it. "No, I don't go to any school. Haven't for a while now. But my mama, she taught me that learning doesn't stop just because life gets hard. She used to say knowledge is the only thing nobody can take from you, even when they take everything else." Emily wanted to ask what happened to Amara's mother, but something in the girl's eyes warned her off. Instead, she pointed to another problem in the book. "Can you show me this one too?" For the next hour, they sat under the oak tree, Amara teaching and Emily learning in a way she never had before. Amara didn't just explain the math, she told stories about it. She showed how algebra was hidden in music, how geometry lived in the architecture of leaves, how statistics could predict everything from weather to human behavior. The ancient Greeks, they thought math was the language of the gods, Amara said, drawing a perfect circle in the dirt without any tools. But really, it's just the language of patterns. And patterns are everywhere, in the way birds fly south, and how your heart beats, in the stock market your daddy probably watches. Emily laughed, really laughed for the first time in months. "You know about the stock market?" "I know about survival," Amara replied. "And in this world, information is survival. I read newspapers people throw away, listen to podcasts on library computers, watch lectures through university windows. You'd be amazed what you can learn when you're invisible." From his balcony, Edward Langston had stepped out to take a call in the fresh air when he spotted them. His daughter sat in the dirt, with some raggedy child, laughing and engaged in a way he'd never seen her with any of her tutors. His first instinct was anger. How dare some stranger infiltrate his property, approach his daughter? But as he watched, he saw Emily pick up the algebra book herself, pointing at problems, asking questions with genuine curiosity. He ended his call mid-sentence and strode toward them, his Italian leather shoes crushing the manicured grass. "Emily," his voice cut through the afternoon air like a blade. "What is going on here?" Both girls looked up. Emily's face immediately closed off, the joy draining from her eyes like water from a broken cup. But the other girl, Amara, she stood up slowly, deliberately, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Daddy, this is Amara. She's been helping me with math." "Helping you?" Edward's voice was ice. "Emily, get inside. Now." "But Daddy, now." Emily stood, but she didn't move toward the house. She explains it better than anyone, better than Dr. Hartwell, better than any of them. "For once, I actually understand." Edward's jaw clenched. He pulled out his phone, ready to call security, but something in his daughter's voice made him pause. She wasn't being defiant. Emily was pleading, something she rarely did. "Sir," Amara spoke up, her voice steady despite her shabby appearance. "I wasn't trying to cause trouble. I just saw she was struggling with the quadratics, and I remembered how my mama taught them to me. Sometimes a different perspective is all someone needs. Your mother? Edward's tone dripped condescension. And where is she now? A flash of pain crossed Amara's face, quickly hidden. Gone. But her lessons aren't. Daddy, please, Emily said softly. Look. She grabbed the stick Amara had been using and quickly solved one of the problems in the dirt, narrating her process. See? The way she taught me, it actually makes sense. X isn't just some mystery anymore. It's an answer waiting to be discovered. Edward watched his daughter work through the problem, correctly, confidently, even enthusiastically. In 5 years of expensive tutors, he'd never seen her this engaged with mathematics. Get off my property, he said to Amara, though his voice had lost some of its edge. If I see you here again, I'll call the police. Amara nodded, handing the textbook back to Emily. Remember, she said quietly, math is just patterns, and you're smart enough to see them all. As Amara walked away, Emily turned to her father with tears in her eyes. She's the first person who made me feel smart instead of stupid. But you had to ruin it, just like you ruin everything. She ran toward the house, leaving Edward standing alone under the oak tree, staring at the equations drawn in the dirt. Despite himself, he knelt down, studying them. The methodology was unconventional but brilliant, breaking complex concepts into digestible pieces. He thought of the fortune he spent on Emily's education, the prestigious tutors who spoke in academic jargon his daughter couldn't penetrate. That evening, Edward sat in his study, trying to focus on quarterly reports, but his mind kept drifting to the scene under the oak tree. Emily had refused to come down for dinner, and when Dr. Hartwell had arrived for the evening session, she'd locked her door and wouldn't respond. His phone rang. His mother. Edward, darling. Margaret Langston's voice was like aged whiskey, smooth but with a bite. I heard Emily caused another scene with her tutors today. How did you? Never mind. Edward knew his mother had sources throughout his staff. It's handle, mother. Is it? Because from what I hear, she's becoming more difficult by the day. Perhaps it's time to consider boarding school. Whitmore Academy in Switzerland is excellent for troubled children. She's not troubled, Edward said, though he wasn't entirely convinced. She's just struggling to adjust. To what? It's been 3 years since Patricia passed. The girl needs structure, discipline. You're too soft on her, Edward. Your father would never have tolerated such behavior. After ending the call, Edward walked to Emily's room. He knocked gently. Emily, we need to talk. Go away. Her voice was muffled, probably by a pillow. I'm trying to protect you. You can't just talk to strangers. She's not a stranger. She's the first real person I've met in forever. Everyone else just wants your money or your approval. She just wanted to help. Edward stood in the hallway, his hands still raised to knock again, but he couldn't find the words. He walked away, but Emily's accusation echoed in his mind. Just like you ruin everything. The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching Edward's mood as he sat at the breakfast table alone. Emily had taken toast to her room, refusing to join him. Dr. Hartwell had already called to express his concerns about Emily's focus, suggesting perhaps a different approach was needed. Code for wanting a raise or threatening to quit. Mr. Langston, Mrs. Patterson, the head housekeeper, entered with his coffee. Miss Emily asked me to give you this. It was a note in Emily's careful handwriting. I want the girl under the tree to teach me. No one else. Edward crumpled the paper, then smoothed it out again. The determination in those simple sentences reminded him painfully of Patricia. His late wife had been stubborn too, especially when she believed in something. In her room, Emily sat by the window, watching the rain create rivers on the glass. She'd barely slept, thinking about Amara's words, about patterns and survival and knowledge that no one could take away. She wondered where Amara slept when it rained, if she had somewhere dry to go. Meanwhile, Amara huddled under the bridge near Riverside Park, watching the rain pound the pavement beyond her small dry space. She'd found half a sandwich in a coffee shop trash can for breakfast, and she ate it slowly, making it last. She thought about the girl in the big house, Emily, and felt a strange mixture of envy and pity. All that money, all those opportunities, and still the kid looked miserable. She pulled out a worn paperback, A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking, that she'd rescued from a library donation bin. The pages were water-stained, and the cover was held on with duct tape, but the words inside were still powerful. Her mama used to say that books were doorways to different worlds, and Amara had been walking through those doors her whole life. Back at the estate, Edward found himself distracted during his morning video conferences. His eyes kept drifting to the window, to the oak tree where yesterday's equations had been drawn in the dirt. The rain had washed them away, but he could still see them in his mind. "Mr. Langston, your thoughts on the merger?" His CFO's voice snapped him back to reality. "I need to review the numbers again," Edward said, though he'd already memorized them. "Let's reconvene tomorrow." After the call, he walked to Emily's room. She was at her desk, the algebra textbook open, trying to recreate what Amara had taught her. "It's not working," she said without looking up. I can't remember exactly how she explained it. Edward sat on the edge of her bed, a rare gesture of approachability. "Emily, you have to understand. We don't know anything about this girl. She could be dangerous, or disturbed, or brilliant," Emily interrupted, finally meeting his eyes. "Dad, she knows things. Real things, not just facts from books, but how to make them matter. When was the last time you met someone who could do that?" Edward thought of his board meetings, filled with yes-men and sycophants who told him what he wanted to hear. When was the last time someone had challenged him, taught him something new? He couldn't remember. That afternoon, as the rain cleared, Amara made her way back to the estate. She knew she shouldn't. The man had threatened to call the police, but something drew her back. Maybe it was the memory of Emily's eager face, so hungry to learn. Or maybe it was the pull of that magnificent oak tree, offering shelter and peace in a chaotic world. She slipped through the gap in the wall, moving carefully through the rose bushes. The thorns caught her shirt, adding another small tear, but she barely noticed. She made it to the oak tree and sat down, pulling out her battered book. She'd been reading for only 10 minutes when she heard footsteps. Emily was running toward her, face bright with relief. "You came back. I was watching from my window, hoping." Emily stopped, catching her breath. "I didn't think you would." "Probably shouldn't have," Amara admitted. "Your dad didn't seem too happy about yesterday." "He's never happy," Emily said, then immediately felt guilty. "That's not true. He used to be when Mom was alive. Now he just works and worries about me becoming exceptional." "You are exceptional," Amara said simply. "You just need to learn in your own way." Emily had brought her textbook and a notebook. For the next hour, Amara taught her about the history hidden in mathematics, how the Arabs had given them algebra, how a woman named Hypatia had been one of the first great mathematicians, how the patterns in nature followed mathematical rules that humans had only discovered, not invented. "See this?" Amara picked up a fallen leaf. "The spiral pattern? It follows something called the Fibonacci sequence. Same pattern you'll find in seashells, galaxies, even your own face." She held up her hands, showing the proportions. "Math isn't just in textbooks. It's in everything." Emily was scribbling notes furiously, her handwriting getting messy, as her excitement grew. "How do you know all this? Were you in gifted programs before?" She trailed off, not sure how to phrase the question. "Before I became homeless?" Amara finished gently. "It's okay, you can say it. And yeah, it was. My mama was a teacher, a real teacher, not just someone with a certificate, but someone who understood that learning was about lighting fires, not filling buckets. She had a gift, and she shared it with me." "What happened to her?" Amara was quiet for a moment. "Cancer. Quick but expensive. My daddy tried to pay for treatment, but, well, some men break under pressure. He broke bad. By the time Mama passed, there was nothing left but debt and a man I didn't recognize anymore." From his study window, Edward watched them again. He'd noticed Amara's return on the security monitors and had been about to call the guards. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way Emily gestured animatedly, or how she laughed, really laughed, at something Amara said. His daughter was transformed, alive in a way he hadn't seen in years. His phone buzzed. An email from Dr. Hartwell. "I regret to inform you that without significant changes to the learning environment, I cannot continue as Emily's tutor. She has become completely uncooperative. Edward almost laughed. A tutor with 3 advanced degrees couldn't reach his daughter, but a homeless child could. The irony wasn't lost on him. He made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of calling security, he walked down to the oak tree. Both girls tensed when they saw him approaching. "Dad, please don't," Emily started. Edward held up his hand. "I'm not here to send anyone away. I'm here to listen." He looked at Amara. "Show me what you taught her." Amara studied him for a moment, gauging his sincerity. Then she picked up the stick again and began to draw. "Your daughter's problem isn't ability, Mr. Langston. It's context. She's been taught that math is about memorizing formulas, but it's really about recognizing patterns and solving problems." She drew a simple diagram. "Let's say you're running a company, something you know about. You have fixed costs and variable costs. You need to figure out the break-even point. That's algebra. But if you just give her the formula without the story, it's meaningless." Edward found himself kneeling in the dirt, his $1,000 suit be damned, following her explanation. She was right. It was the same mathematics he used every day in business, just stripped of jargon and pretension. "Where did you learn to teach like this?" he asked. "Survival's a good teacher," Amara replied. "When you're hungry, you learn to calculate exactly how many cans you need to return for a meal. When you're cold, you figure out heat loss and insulation real quick. Math stops being abstract when your life depends on it." That evening, Edward called a family meeting in his study. It was just him and Emily now, their family of 2. "Dr. Hartwell has resigned," he announced. Emily's face fell. "So you're sending me to boarding school?" "No." Edward took a breath. "I'm considering something unconventional. The girl, Amara, she clearly has a gift for teaching. I'm thinking of offering her a position." Emily's eyes widened. "Really?" "There would be conditions," Edward continued, his business mind already working through the logistics. "Background checks, proper arrangements, a trial period. And she would need to—" He paused, unsure how to phrase it. "Present herself appropriately." "You mean look less poor?" Emily said bluntly. Edward winced. "Emily, Dad, she's brilliant whether she's wearing designer clothes or rags. That's the whole point. She's real." The next day, Edward had Mrs. Patterson prepare a simple meal, sandwiches, fruit, lemonade, and set it up under the oak tree. When Amara arrived, cautious as a wild animal, she found Emily and Edward waiting. "I have a proposition," Edward said without preamble. "I'll provide you with food, clothing, and accommodation in the staff quarters. In exchange, you help Emily with her studies. A trial period 1 month." Amara's eyes narrowed. "You mean you want to hire me as a servant?" "I want to hire you as an educator," Edward corrected, though the words felt foreign in his mouth. "My daughter learns from you in ways she doesn't from anyone else. I'm businessman enough to recognize value when I see it." "Dad's not good with words," Emily added quickly. "What he means is, please stay and be my teacher." "My friend." Amara looked between them, the billionaire in his perfect suit and the lonely girl in her designer dress. Strange bedfellows, but she'd seen stranger things in her young life. "I have conditions too," she said. "I teach my way, not from some prescribed curriculum, and I won't be treated like a servant. I eat at the table, not in the kitchen. I come and go as I please. And Emily learns about the real world, not just the sanitized version you've built for her." Edward's jaw tightened. No one had spoken to him like this in years. But Emily grabbed his hand, squeezing it, a gesture she hadn't made since Patricia's funeral. "Deal," he said. That evening, Amara stood in the small but clean room in the staff quarters, barely believing it was real. A bed with actual sheets, a bathroom with hot water, a door she could lock. She sat on the bed and pulled out the one photo she'd managed to keep. Her and her mama at her school science fair, both beaming, holding a blue ribbon. "I'm trying, Mama," she whispered. "Using what you taught me, just like you said." Meanwhile, in the main house, Edward stood outside Emily's room, listening to her hum while she worked on math problems, actually humming while doing homework. He thought of Patricia, how she'd always said Emily needed more than just education. She needed inspiration. His phone rang. His mother. "Edward, I heard from Mrs. Patterson that you've hired some street child." "I've hired a tutor, Mother. Results speak for themselves." This will be a disaster. Mark my words. After hanging up, Edward walked to his window, looking out at the oak tree. Maybe his mother was right. Maybe this would end badly. But for the first time in 3 years, his daughter was happy. That had to count for something. What he didn't know was that Amara had her own secrets, her own reasons for being drawn to this particular estate. The Langston name had been in her life before, in ways that would soon surface and change everything. But for now, there was just a girl with a gift for teaching, a lonely child hungry to learn, and a father slowly realizing that the best investments weren't always the ones that looked good on paper. The first morning in the staff quarters, Amara woke before dawn, her body still trained to the rhythms of survival. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The soft bed felt wrong, the silence too complete. On the streets, there was always noise, traffic, sirens, other people trying to survive the night. Here, there was just the distant ticking of a clock and her own breathing. She dressed quickly in the same clothes she'd worn for days, then stopped. On the dresser was a package Mrs. Patterson had left. Basic clothes, nothing fancy, but clean and whole. Amara held up a simple blue shirt, running her fingers over fabric that didn't have tears or stains. It felt like wearing someone else's life. In the main house, Emily was also awake early, too excited to sleep. She pressed her face against her bedroom window, watching the staff quarters, waiting for any sign of movement. When she finally saw Amara emerge, she practically flew down the stairs. "Emily, breakfast first," Edward called from the dining room, but Emily was already out the door. She found Amara standing under the oak tree, looking uncomfortable in her new clothes. "You look different," Emily said, then quickly added, "Good different. Clean different." I know what you mean," Amara said gently. "Feel like I'm wearing a costume. Like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not." "Maybe you're just being who you always were, just with better circumstances," Emily suggested, wise beyond her years. They settled into what would become their morning routine. Amara pulled out a worn notebook she kept through everything, its pages filled with observations, formulas, quotes from books she'd read. Emily watched, fascinated, as Amara turned to a page covered in sketches of leaves, each annotated with mathematical ratios. "You see, nature doesn't just follow math randomly," Amara explained. "It uses math efficiently. Every pattern you see, the spiral of a shell, the branching of trees, it's all about maximizing resources while minimizing energy. That's survival at its most basic. Like how you survived," Emily said quietly. "Everything's about survival, one way or another," Amara replied. "Your dad survives in boardrooms. You survive in a house that feels too big. We all find our ways." From a kitchen window, Mrs. Patterson watched them, her expression thoughtful. She'd worked for the Langstons for 20 years, had seen Emily grow from a laughing baby to a withdrawn preteen. This was the first time in years she'd seen the girl so animated. "Something interesting out there?" James, the estate's driver, asked as he poured his morning coffee. "That new girl Mr. Langston brought in. There's something different about her." "Different how?" Mrs. Patterson couldn't quite explain it. "She moves through the house like she's memorizing exits. Notices everything but says little. And the way she teaches Miss Emily, it's not like those stuffy tutors. She makes the girl think." By afternoon, word had spread through the staff quarters. Opinions were divided. Some, like Mrs. Patterson, were cautiously optimistic. Others, particularly Mr. Humphreys, the head of security, were suspicious. "Mark my words, she's trouble," Humphreys muttered to anyone who'd listen. "Street kids always are. She's probably casing the place, looking for things to steal." "Oh, stop it," Maria, one of the housekeepers, scolded. "She's just a child who's had hard times. That's when they're most dangerous," Humphreys insisted. Amara was aware of the whispers, the way conversations stopped when she entered a room. She'd learned to read the air around her, to sense hostility and fear like changes in weather. But she focused on Emily, on the teaching that felt like breathing, natural and necessary. That evening, Edward worked late in his study, but his mind kept wandering to the window. He could see Emily and Amara in the library, heads bent together over books. He'd never seen his daughter voluntarily spend time in the library before. Unable to concentrate, he walked down to check on them. He found Amara reading from a philosophy text while Emily took notes. Plato, Edward said, surprised. That seems advanced for an 11-year-old. Not if you connect it to things she understands, Amara replied without looking up. The allegory of the cave is just about perspective. Like how Emily sees one world from her window and I see another from the street, but we're looking at the same city. And both views are real, Emily added excitedly. Just like the shadows on the cave wall are real to the prisoners, even if they're not the whole truth. Edward found himself sitting down, drawn into the discussion despite himself. I remember reading this in college. Never thought of it that way. That's because you were taught to memorize it for tests, not to live it, Amara said, then caught herself. Sorry, I didn't mean. No, you're right, Edward admitted. I memorized everything, aced every test, but I don't think I truly learned much until I was forced to apply it in the real world. Later, after Emily had gone to bed, Edward found Amara in the library, reading by lamplight. The book was Advanced Quantum Physics, dog-eared and annotated in multiple hands. Where did you get that? He asked. University library donation sale. 50 cents because the binding was damaged. She showed him where she'd repaired it with tape and glue. Previous owner was a grad student. Their notes are almost as valuable as the text. How does a homeless? Edward stopped, rephrasing. How did you maintain your education? Amara set down the book, considering how much to reveal. My mama was a teacher, like I said, but before that, she was a physicist. Youngest black woman to get her PhD from Columbia. She could have worked anywhere, but she wanted to teach kids who looked like her, show them what was possible. What happened? System happened. Budget cuts. School closed. She took work where she could find it, tutoring rich kids whose parents didn't know they were getting a genius for the price of desperation. Then she got sick and... Amara shrugged, a gesture that contained years of pain. I'm sorry, Edward said, and meant it. She left me tools, Amara continued. Not money or things, but ways of thinking. She used to say, baby, they can take your home, your things, even your dignity. But what's in your head? That's yours forever. Edward was about to respond when his phone buzzed. Security alert. He frowned, checking the app. Someone was at the main gate, demanding to speak with him about the girl. Minutes later, Humphreys escorted in a woman in a rumpled suit carrying a official-looking folder. Mr. Langston? I'm Sandra Walsh from Child Protective Services. We've received a concerning report about a minor living on your property without proper documentation. Edward's jaw tightened. Everything is legal and above board. The young woman is employed as a tutor. She's 13 years old, Mr. Langston. There are procedures, paperwork, guardian consent requirements. Walsh opened her folder. Our records show Amara Okoye has been listed as a missing person for 8 months. Her father never reported her location to authorities. Because he was drunk and couldn't remember where he left me, Amara said from the doorway. Everyone turned. She stood straight, dignified despite her youth. I ran because staying would have killed me faster than the streets. Walsh's expression softened slightly. Amara, you need proper care, schooling. I've read more books in the last year than most kids read in their entire education. I can solve calculus problems in my head and quote Shakespeare from memory. What exactly do you think school will give me that I don't already have? Safety, stability, legal protection, Walsh replied. Edward stepped forward. What if we could provide all that here? Proper documentation, educational assessments, whatever's required. Walsh looked skeptical. This is highly irregular. So, is a 13-year-old teaching an 11-year-old advanced mathematics and philosophy? Edward countered. But it's working. I'm willing to go through proper channels, but I won't let you remove her without cause. After Walsh left with a warning about follow-up visits and required paperwork, Amara sat on the library floor, suddenly looking every bit the child she was. She'll be back, Amara said quietly. They always come back, and eventually they win. Not this time, Emily said fiercely, appearing in her pajamas. She'd been listening from the stairs. Dad doesn't lose. Tell her, Dad. Edward looked at his daughter's determined face, Then at Amara's resigned one. We'll figure it out. But Amara, I need to know, is there anything about your past that could complicate this? Your father, is he? He's nobody, Amara said quickly. Too quickly. Just a man who broke when life got hard. But that night, unable to sleep, Amara pulled out a crumpled envelope she'd hidden in her few possessions. Inside was a letter, unopened, addressed to her in her father's handwriting. The postmark was recent. He was looking for her. And if he found her here, with all this wealth around, she knew exactly what he'd do. The charity gala at the Fairmont Hotel was exactly the kind of event Edward usually dominated. 500 of the city's wealthiest gathered to write checks and consolidate power. But tonight, he felt exposed, aware of the whispers that followed him through the ballroom. Edward, Richard Haversham, CEO of a competing tech firm, approached with a sharp smile. Heard you've made some interesting additions to your household staff. I've hired a remarkable tutor for Emily, Edward replied evenly. Yes, remarkable indeed. Harvard? Yale? Oh wait, I heard it was the School of Hard Knocks. Haversham laughed at his own joke. Really, Edward, what were you thinking? Across the room, Margaret Langston held court among the city's old money matriarchs, her expression arctic as she deflected increasingly pointed questions about her son's judgment. The Langston Foundation has always supported education, she said smoothly. Sometimes that takes unconventional forms. Unconventional is one word for it. Nancy Whitmore smirked. I heard the girl is straight off the streets. Can you imagine? What's next? Recruiting tutors from prison. Emily, who was supposed to be home with Mrs. Patterson, had convinced the housekeeper to let her attend. She knew her father would need support. She stood near the dessert table in her best dress, hearing everything. When she couldn't take it anymore, Emily walked straight to the center of the room where her father was surrounded by his business associates. The orchestra had just paused between songs, and her voice carried clearly. Excuse me, she said, her young voice cutting through adult chatter. I'd like to say something about my tutor. Edward started toward her. Emily, this isn't. No, they're all talking about Amara without knowing her. Emily turned to the crowd, many of whom were now watching with amused condescension. Last week, Amara taught me why the stock market follows mathematical patterns. She showed me how to calculate compound interest in my head. She explained quantum physics using dance steps. She's 13 years old and smarter than anyone in this room. Emily, Margaret Langston's voice was steel. That's quite enough. No, grandmother, it's not. Emily's voice grew stronger. You all send your children to expensive schools where they memorize facts they forget the next day. Amara teaches me to think. She survived on the streets using mathematics and science. How many of your children could do that? The room was silent. Then someone laughed, cruel and dismissive. How charming, Haversham said loudly. The girl's been completely taken in. Edward, I hope you're keeping the silver locked up. The drive home was silent until Edward finally spoke. That was inappropriate, Emily. Those people are horrible, Emily finished. They're horrible, Dad, and you care more about what they think than what's true. That's not. Then why did you just stand there? Why didn't you defend her? Edward didn't have an answer. Back at the estate, Amara was in the library, unaware of the gala drama. She was writing in her notebook, working on lesson plans for Emily when she heard the car's return. The anger in the voices carried, even through closed windows. She found Emily crying under the oak tree, still in her gala dress. Bad night, Amara asked, sitting beside her. They're awful. All of them. They talked about you like you were nothing. I'm nothing to them, Amara said gently. That's how the world works. But you're everything to me, Emily said fiercely. You're my teacher and my friend, and the only person who sees me as more than Edward Langston's daughter. Your father sees you. No, he doesn't. He sees who he wants me to be. You see who I am. Edward appeared, his bow tie undone, looking tired. Emily, it's late. I'm not going inside until you apologize, Emily said. For what? For not defending Amara. For caring more about those people's opinions than the truth. Edward looked at Amara, who was studying the ground. I'm sorry, he said, though it wasn't clear to whom he was apologizing. Words are easy, Amara said quietly. My mama used to say, Don't tell me what you value. Show me your budget. You value what you invest in, Mr. Langston. So what are you investing in? The next morning, Edward was in his study when Mrs. Patterson knocked urgently. Sir, there's a situation. He followed her to the entrance hall where a man stood, tall, well-dressed, but with something unstable in his eyes. The resemblance to Amara was unmistakable. Darius Okoye, the man said, extending his hand. I believe you have my daughter. Edward didn't take the hand. Mr. Okoye, Amara is safe here. Safe. Darius laughed bitterly. You think I'm a danger? I'm her father. I've been looking for her for months. Filed police reports, hired investigators. And I find her here, being used as entertainment for your spoiled child. She's being educated and cared for. She's being exploited. A 13-year-old working as a teacher? Without my consent? My lawyer will have a field day with this. Amara appeared at the top of the stairs. Don't, she said quietly. Darius's face transformed, tears appearing instantly. Baby girl, I've been so worried. Come here. No. Amara, I'm your father. You stopped being that the day you sold Mama's books for liquor money. Amara's voice was steady, but her hand shook. The day you forgot to pick me up from the hospital when she died. The day you brought those men to our apartment and told them I could earn my keep. The room went cold. Edward stepped protectively closer to the stairs. Darius's tears dried instantly, his expression hardening. You always were dramatic, just like your mother. Making up stories. Security footage doesn't lie, Amara said. Neither do hospital records. Or the police report I tried to file before you convinced them I was just a troubled kid. You're coming with me, Darius said, moving toward the stairs. Edward blocked him. You're leaving. Now. Or what? You'll call the police? Go ahead. I'm her legal guardian. You're harboring a runaway. Dad. Emily appeared beside Amara. What's happening? Nothing, sweetheart, Edward said. Mr. Okoye was just leaving. Darius smiled, ugly and knowing. For now, but I'll be back. With lawyers. And we'll discuss proper compensation for the trauma my daughter has endured, being kept from her loving father. After he left, Amara sank onto the stairs. He'll destroy everything. That's what he does. Finds something good and breaks it for money. We won't let him, Emily said. You don't understand. He has legal rights. He's my father. Edward pulled out his phone. We'll see about that. Margaret, I need the name of our best family lawyer. Yes, now. That night, unable to sleep, Emily found her father in his study, surrounded by legal documents. Can we win? She asked. I don't know, Edward admitted. The law favors biological parents, even bad ones. But she can't go back to him. She'll run away again, or worse. Edward looked at his daughter. When did you become so wise? When Amara taught me that wisdom isn't about knowing things, it's about understanding them. The next morning brought lawyers, social workers, and Darius with his own legal team. The library became a battlefield of depositions and accusations. My client has been searching desperately for his daughter, Darius's lawyer argued. He's completed rehab, has a job, a stable home, all of which mysteriously appeared in the last week. Edward's lawyer countered. Paid for by whom, we wonder? Through it all, Amara sat silent, Emily holding her hand. Finally, the CPS supervisor spoke. Amara, you're old enough to have a voice in this. What do you want? Amara looked at her father, the man who'd once carried her on his shoulders, who'd taught her to ride a bike, who'd slowly dissolved into someone she didn't recognize. I want to stay where I'm safe, where I can learn and teach, where I'm valued for my mind, not what I can steal or sell. Darius stood abruptly. This isn't over. You poison her against me. He pointed at Edward. But blood is blood. She's mine. After the meeting, Edward found Amara under the oak tree, staring at the sky. You okay? My mama loved him once, she said. Said he was brilliant, just broken by a world that didn't have space for black men to be soft. But broken things can cut you. And I've bled enough. We'll fight this, Edward promised. Why? Amara asked. Really, why do you care? Edward thought about it. Because Emily needs you. Because you're remarkable. And because Patricia would have fought for you. My wife, she believed in protecting brilliant minds, especially ones the world overlooks. That evening, A package arrived for Amara. Inside was a locket, silver, old, with a photo of her mother at a podium, accepting an award. The note read, "Found this in our foundation archives. Your mother received our Excellence in Education Award in 2018. She was supposed to get a renewal grant, but things changed. I'm sorry." Yell. Amara stared at the photo, at the Langston Foundation logo on the certificate her mother held. "You knew her," she whispered. Edward nodded. "Not personally, but the foundation knew her work. The grant was cut during restructuring. I signed off on it without really looking at who we were affecting. So you destroyed my family before my father did." "Amara." She stood, still holding the locket. "I need to think." Emily started to follow, but Edward stopped her. "Give her time." That night, Darius made his move. He leaked the story to the press. Billionaire keeps homeless girl as servant. By morning, news vans surrounded the estate. Edward's phone rang continuously. Board members, investors, partners, all demanding explanations. "This is a disaster," Margaret Langston said, arriving unannounced. "You need to send the girl away immediately." "No." "Edward, be reasonable." "I said no, Mother. For once in my life, I'm doing the right thing, not the easy thing." Emily, who'd been listening, ran to hug her father. "Mom will be proud," she whispered. Margaret's expression softened slightly. Patricia always was too idealistic for her own good. She paused, but she was rarely wrong about people. Under the oak tree, Amara sat with the locket, making a decision. She could run. She'd done it before. Or she could stay and fight, use her mind the way her mother taught her. Emily found her there as the sun set. "You're not leaving, are you?" "No," Amara said. "Your father made mistakes, but he's trying to fix them. That's more than most people do." "He's not perfect," Emily agreed. "But he's learning. You're teaching both of us." As they walked back to the house together, neither saw Darius watching from beyond the wall, his phone in hand, texting someone, "Time for phase 2. The billionaire won't know what hit him. Sandra Walsh from CPS sat across from Edward in his study, her expression grave as she spread documents across his mahogany desk. The morning light streaming through the windows seemed too cheerful for the weight of what she was about to reveal. "Mr. Langston, I need you to understand something about Amara Okoye," she began, pulling out a file thick with academic records. "This isn't just a bright child who fell on hard times. This is possibly one of the most gifted minds of her generation." Edward leaned forward, studying the papers. Test scores that defied belief. Academic competition victories. Letters of recommendation from university professors who'd mentored her through special programs. At age 8, she was solving differential equations, Walsh continued. At 10, she presented a paper on quantum mechanics at a youth symposium that had physicists taking notes. Her mother, Dr. Sadie Okoye, was brilliant, yes, but Amara surpassed her before she turned 11. Then how did she end up on the streets? Walsh's voice hardened. "Because our system is designed to catch falling children, not falling prodigies. When Dr. Okoye got sick, she spent everything on treatment. The medical bills destroyed them financially. And when she died," Walsh pulled out another document. "This is the rejection letter for the Langston Foundation grant renewal, the one that would have saved them." Edward read his own signature at the bottom. Remembered that quarter, they'd cut 15% of all educational grants to fund a new technology center. It had seemed like smart business at the time. After her mother's death, Darius Okoye spiraled, Walsh continued. Gambling, drinking worse. He saw Amara's intelligence as a commodity to exploit. There are records of him trying to sell her tutoring services to pay debts, attempting to enter her in competitions with cash prizes he could claim. When she refused and ran away, he didn't report it for 3 weeks, until he'd sobered up enough to realize she might be worth more found than lost. Emily appeared in the doorway, having escaped Mrs. Patterson's watch. "Is this about Amara? Where is she?" "She's in the garden," Edward said gently. "We're trying to help her." "Then why does she look so sad?" Through the window, they could see Amara sitting under the oak tree, arms wrapped around her knees, looking smaller than her 13 years. "Because sometimes the people who should protect us are the ones who hurt us most," Walsh said, her professional composure cracking slightly. Mr. Langston, that girl has survived things that would break most adults. The fact that she's still kind, still teaching, still believing in something better, that's not just intelligence. That's extraordinary strength. Edward stood. What do we need to do to keep her safe? Prove that her father is unfit, which given his history shouldn't be hard. But he's gotten clever, or someone's coaching him. He's cleaned up his act on paper, at least temporarily. Someone's funding him, Edward said, his business instincts alert. The lawyers, the sudden rehabilitation, the stable home. That's expensive. Follow the money. Walsh agreed. In the meantime, I can place an emergency protection order, but it's temporary. You have maybe 2 weeks to build a case. After Walsh left, Edward found Emily teaching Amara a card game under the oak tree, trying to cheer her up. Did you know, Amara was saying, that poker is actually about probability and psychology more than luck? You can calculate odds, but reading people, that's the real skill. Like how you read people? Emily asked. Everyone tells stories with their bodies, Amara explained. Your dad, when he's worried, he touches his wedding ring. You bite your lower lip when you're thinking hard. Mrs. Patterson hums when she's happy, but goes silent when she's upset. Edward approached slowly, not wanting to interrupt. Amara, we need to talk. She looked up at him with those 2 wise eyes. Ms. Walsh told you everything. Enough. I'm sorry about the grant, about not seeing what our decisions cost real people. You couldn't have known, Amara said, but her voice was flat. No, but I should have cared enough to look closer. Edward sat on the ground, his expensive suit be damned. Patricia, my wife, she always said I was good at seeing numbers but blind to narratives. She was right. Mom was usually right, Emily said softly. Your mother, Amara said suddenly. She wrote a note on my mother's grant application. I remember because Mama kept it on our refrigerator. It said, this is the kind of educator who changes the world, one child at a time. Edward's throat tightened. That sounds like Patricia. After she died, after you signed the rejection, my mother said something I didn't understand then. She said, even good people can do harmful things when they stop seeing faces and only see figures. That afternoon, Edward did something he hadn't done in years. He walked through the city, really walked, not from car to building, but through neighborhoods he'd only seen from highway overpasses. He found himself at the bridge where Darius had said Amara taught other homeless children. There were signs of life, cardboard shelters, a makeshift school area with equations still chalked on concrete pillars. An elderly homeless man sat nearby, watching Edward with suspicion. You looking for someone? The man asked. Understanding, Edward replied honestly. A girl named Amara used to teach here. The man's face softened. Little professor, we called her. Smart as a whip, kind as Sunday. Taught my grandson to read when the schools gave up on him. You the rich man who took her in. I'm trying to help her. The man laughed, but not unkindly. Maybe she's helping you. That child, she got a gift for showing people what matters. My grandson, he's back in school now, top of his class. All because a homeless girl took time to teach him that words were power. Edward left a $100 bill on the man's blanket and walked on, but the man called after him. Hey, you want to help that girl? Don't try to make her like you. Let her make you more like her. That evening, Martin Harrow arrived at the estate uninvited. Edward's business rival stood in the foyer, smiling his shark smile. Edward, we need to talk about your little charity case. There's nothing to discuss. Oh, but there is. Harrow pulled out his phone, showing a video, security footage of Amara in a store, slipping food into her pockets weeks before coming to the estate. Theft is still a crime, even for minors. Especially for minors with fathers willing to press charges. Edward's jaw clenched. You're funding Darius. I'm investing in opportunities, Harrow corrected. You've gotten soft, Edward. First, your wife's Bleeding Heart Foundations, now this. The board is concerned. The board can. Vote you out? Yes, we can. Unless you see reason. Send the girl back to her father. Let this story die. Focus on what matters. Profit. After Harrow left, Edward found Amara and Emily in the library. Amara was teaching Emily chess, using historical battles as context for each move. You see, Amara was explaining, the queen is the most powerful piece, but the king is the most important. Sometimes power and importance aren't the same thing. Like how you have power because of what you know, but dad has importance because of what he owns. Emily asked. Your father has both, Amara corrected. He just forgets sometimes that power without purpose is just potential energy. Unused. Wasted. Edward cleared his throat. Amara, I need to ask you something difficult. The video of you taking food. Stealing, Amara corrected calmly. Call it what it was. I stole to survive. $3.40 worth of bread and peanut butter. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed either. When you're starving, moral absolutes become flexible. They'll try to use it against us. Let them, Amara said. I'll stand in any court and explain what hunger feels like. How it makes you dream about food, wake up chewing on nothing. How your body starts eating itself. Let them explain why a child stealing bread is criminal, but a corporation stealing wages is business. Emily grabbed Amara's hand. We won't let them take you. Sometimes wanting something isn't enough, Amara said gently. But fighting for it anyway. That's what makes us human. The next morning, Edward did something unprecedented. He called an emergency board meeting and brought Amara and Emily with him. This is highly irregular. Board member Patricia Steinberg protested. So he's trying to blackmail me through a child, Edward replied coldly. He turned on the projector, showing Amara's academic records, her test scores, her achievements. This young woman has been teaching my daughter for weeks. Emily's scores have improved 30%. More importantly, her curiosity, confidence, and compassion have flourished. We're not an education company, Harrow interjected. No, we're a technology company, Edward agreed. And technology without human intelligence is just expensive metal. Amara represents the kind of mind we should be nurturing, not discarding. Amara stood. May I? The board looked shocked, but Edward nodded. You're all successful people, Amara began. You measure value in dollars, returns, market share. But what's the value of a child learning to love learning? What's the return on investment when someone discovers they're capable of more than they imagined? You can't put it on a spreadsheet, but that doesn't make it worthless. She pulled out her worn notebook. I've been teaching Emily, yes, but also 7 other children, staff members' kids, neighborhood children who struggle in traditional schools. Each one has shown improvement, not just in grades, but in confidence. That's 8 futures change for the cost of time and attention. This is all very touching, Harrow said dismissively, but nothing, Emily interrupted, standing beside Amara. You're all so busy protecting your wealth that you've forgotten why it matters. My mom understood. She said money was just a tool to build better worlds. Amara is building better worlds. What are you building? The room was silent. Then, from the back, old Thomas Whitman, the longest-serving board member, spoke up. The girl has a point. Edward, what are you proposing? Edward stood straighter. I'm proposing we stop being afraid. We keep Amara here, fight any legal challenges, and maybe, just maybe, remember that companies are made of people, not profits. The meeting had ended in a stalemate, but Edward considered it a minor victory. Harrow hadn't gotten the votes to force immediate action. Still, as they drove home, Amara was quiet in the back seat, staring out at the city passing by. You okay? Emily asked. Your grandfather Whitman, Amara said to Edward. He built this company from nothing, didn't he? How did you know that was my grandfather? The portrait in the boardroom. Same eyes as Emily. He looked kind. He was complicated, Edward admitted. Brilliant, but ruthless in business. It wasn't until late in life that he started the foundation, trying to give back. Guilt makes generous donors, Amara observed. My mama used to say that fortune built on others' misfortune always feels heavy. Back at the estate, they found an unexpected visitor, Dr. Nia Fairfax, a renowned educator whose books lined Amara's makeshift shelf in her room. Dr. Fairfax? Amara's voice cracked with surprise and awe. The elegant black woman smiled warmly. So you're the young genius causing such a stir. May we talk? They sat under the oak tree. It had become the unofficial heart of all important conversations. Dr. Fairfax pulled out a tablet, showing videos from various sources. "This is you teaching under the bridge 3 months ago," she said. The grainy footage showed Amara using pieces of trash to explain molecular structures to a group of homeless children. "This is you at the public library, tutoring that woman for her GED." Another video. "And this is my favorite. You teaching Emily here, making her laugh while learning calculus." "How did you?" "I've been watching you for longer than you know," Dr. Fairfax said. "Your mother was my student once, years ago. When I heard about a young girl teaching in the streets, describing quantum physics with dance steps, I knew it had to be Sadie's daughter." Amara's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "You knew my mother?" "I knew her brilliance, her passion, her determination to make education accessible to everyone." Dr. Fairfax turned to Edward. "Mr. Langston, what Amara has been doing naturally is what educators spend decades trying to master, making complex ideas simple without making them simplistic." "What are you proposing?" Edward asked. "A partnership. I run a program for gifted educators, not students, but natural teachers who need certification and support. Amara could be our youngest candidate." "I'm 15, Amara protested." "Mozart was composing at 5, Dr. Fairfax countered. "Age is just a number when genius is involved. But more than that, you have something that can't be taught: empathy. You see where people are and meet them there." That evening, Edward drew up a contract, not employment, but a formal educational mentorship. Amara would continue teaching Emily and other children while pursuing certification through Dr. Fairfax's program. Room, board, and a modest stipend for books and materials. "This is too much," Amara said, reading it over. "This is a starting point," Edward corrected. "We'll adjust as needed." The next morning brought a new routine. Amara set up what she called the Under the Oak curriculum, daily lessons in the garden that blended traditional subjects with life skills. Emily was her first student, but soon others joined. Marcus, the gardener's son, struggling with dyslexia, came for reading help. Amara taught him using plant labels and garden journals, making words connect to things he loved. Sarah, whose mother worked in the kitchen, was brilliant but cripplingly shy. Amara had her teach back lessons to stuffed animals first, building confidence in a safe space. Even some of the staff began lingering during lessons, pretending to work nearby, while listening to Amara explain how economics worked using the estate's budget as example, or how chemistry lived in Mrs. Patterson's kitchen. "She's building a school," Mrs. Patterson told Edward one evening. "Right under your nose, that girl is building a proper school." The transformation wasn't just in the children. Emily bloomed, becoming a teaching assistant, helping younger kids with patience she'd never shown before. She started a journal, documenting each lesson, each breakthrough. "We should film these," Emily suggested one day. "Other kids could learn too." "Privacy is important," Amara cautioned. "Not everyone wants their struggles public." "Then we film the lessons, not the students," Emily countered. "Like those Khan Academy videos, but better because you actually make things fun." Edward, watching from a study window, saw his daughter and Amara planning, teaching, learning together. For the first time since Patricia's death, the estate felt alive. But success breeds scrutiny. A reporter named Jessica Cole started investigating, digging into Amara's past, Edward's finances, the unusual arrangement. "Mr. Langston," she said, arriving unannounced one afternoon, "I'm writing a piece about alternative education models. I'd love to interview your daughter's tutor." "No comment," Edward said firmly. "Public interest is high. A homeless girl teaching a billionaire's daughter? It's either heartwarming or exploitative, depending on the angle." "It's neither," Amara said, appearing in the doorway. "It's just education. The way it should be: accessible, engaging, transformative." Cole smiled, sensing a story. "May I observe a lesson?" Edward started to refuse, but Amara nodded. Transparency kills rumors. The next day, Cole watched as Amara taught a mixed group. Emily, 3 staff children, and 2 neighborhood kids whose parents had heard about the informal school. The lesson was on ecosystems, but Amara connected it to economics, literature, and even music. "You see," Amara explained, using the oak tree as example, "everything is connected. The tree gives oxygen, home for birds, shade for us. We get a carbon dioxide, water, protection. It's not charity, it's exchange. Like any good relationship. Is that how you see your relationship with the Langstons? Cole asked. An exchange? Amara met her gaze steadily. I see it as symbiosis. I teach Emily. She teaches me about persistence. Mr. Langston provides stability. I provide perspective. We all grow. Cole's article, when it came out, was surprisingly balanced, though the headlines still stung. The unusual classroom, when privilege meets poverty. But it brought unexpected benefits. Dr. Fairfax used it to promote her program. 3 other families inquired about having their children join the lessons. A local foundation offered a grant. We could actually build something here, Edward said one evening, reviewing the proposals with Amara and Emily. We already have, Emily pointed out. We just need to make it official. But Harrow wasn't done. At a cocktail party Edward couldn't avoid, his rival cornered him. Touching story in the paper, Harrow said. But I wonder what other stories might surface. The girl's father, for instance, has some interesting tales about your family's connection to his wife's death. That's a lie. Is it? Your foundation cut her funding. She couldn't afford treatment. She died. Cause and effect. Edward. How do you think that plays in the media? Edward's blood ran cold. Not because it was false, but because it was true enough to destroy them all. That night, he found Amara teaching Emily constellations, their heads tilted back to the night sky. Did you know, Amara was saying, that the light from those stars took years to reach us? We're literally looking at the past. Like how the past keeps reaching into now, Emily said wisely. Amara glanced at Edward. You heard about Harrow's threat. How did you? You're touching your wedding ring. She turned back to the sky. My mother wouldn't want her death used as a weapon. She believed in building bridges, not walls. Even when those bridges are hard to cross. Especially then, that's when they matter most. The next morning, Amara made a request that surprised everyone. I want to expand the teaching circle, she said. Include kids from the shelters, the ones I used to teach. They need this too. The liability, Edward began, can be managed. Dr. Fairfax interjected, having arrived for their weekly planning session. With proper structure, waivers, supervision. This could be a model program. And if someone gets hurt, if parents complain, Edward asked, then we deal with it. Amara said simply, fear of what might happen can't stop us from doing what should happen. Emily grabbed her father's hand. Mom would say yes. Edward looked at his daughter, at Amara, at Dr. Fairfax. 3 generations of women, each brilliant in their own way, each pushing him to be better than his fears. Okay, he said, but we do this right. Legal framework, safety protocols, everything. Amara smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. Mr. Langston, when have I ever done anything without thinking it through? That afternoon, as Amara and Emily planned the expansion, mapping out schedules and curriculum, neither noticed the figure watching from beyond the wall. Darius Okoye lowered his binoculars, pulling out his phone. Yeah, it's me, he said to whoever answered. They're expanding the program. More kids, more exposure, more vulnerability. Time to move to phase 2. In the house, Edward's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Check your foundation's records for 2018. The Okoye file. You'll find more than you bargained for. He went to his study, pulling up the old files. What he found made him sink into his chair. There was more to the story, so much more. Patricia hadn't just approved the initial grant. She'd been mentoring Sadie Okoye personally. There were emails, plans for a revolutionary education program that would have changed thousands of lives. All of it ended when Patricia got sick. Edward had been so focused on her treatment, on his grief, that he'd signed whatever papers were put in front of him, including the one that destroyed the Okoye family. The weight of unintended consequences pressed down on him. But from outside, he heard laughter. Emily and Amara teaching the gardener's son to juggle while explaining the physics of motion. Maybe redemption wasn't about fixing the past. Maybe it was about building a better future, one lesson at a time. The headline hit the morning news cycle like a bomb. Billionaire replaces qualified tutors with homeless child. The accompanying photo showed Amara and Emily under the oak tree, taken with a long-range lens that made the scene look secretive, almost sinister. Edward's phone started ringing at 5:47 a.m. and hadn't stopped. Board members, investors, partners, everyone wanted an explanation. "Dad," Emily stood in his study doorway, still in her pajamas, holding her tablet. "They're saying horrible things about Amara online." Edward pulled his daughter close, reading over her shoulder. The comments were vicious, accusations of exploitation, inappropriate relationships, child endangerment. Someone had even started a petition to save Emily Langston from dangerous influences. "Where's Amara?" Edward asked. "In her room. She won't come out." Edward found Amara sitting on her bed, surrounded by her books, the morning light casting shadows across her face. She looked younger than 13, vulnerable in a way she rarely allowed herself to be. "I should leave," she said without looking up. "This is hurting Emily." "This is hurting all of us," Edward corrected. "But running doesn't solve anything. It did before. When things got bad, I ran. Survived. You're not alone now." Amara finally met his eyes. "Mr. Langston, they're going to dig up everything. Every place I slept, everything I stole to survive, every time I couldn't save another kid on the streets. They'll make me look like a criminal or a victim. Nothing in between." Before Edward could respond, Mrs. Patterson knocked urgently. "Sir, there are reporters at the gate, and someone from the school board is here." The school board representative, Mrs. Henrietta Price, sat rigidly in the formal living room, her expression disapproving. "Mr. Langston, we've received numerous complaints from parents about your daughter's influence on other students." "My daughter's influence?" Edward kept his voice level. "She's been teaching other children using methods learned from," Price paused delicately, "an uncertified individual. Parents are concerned about academic standards." "Emily's grades have improved by 30%, Edward pointed out. "Grades aren't everything. There's also the matter of appropriate social circles." "Are you suggesting my daughter should be punished for learning from someone poor?" Emily's voice cut through the room. She stood in the doorway with Amara behind her. "Because that's what this is really about, isn't it?" "Emily," Price's tone was condescending, "you're too young to understand." "Understand perfectly," Emily interrupted. "You're scared that if kids learn they can be taught by someone who doesn't fit your perfect mold, they might start questioning what else you're wrong about." "Young lady." "No." Amara stepped forward. "She's right to be angry. But Emily, responding with anger gives them power." She turned to Price. "Ma'am, would you be willing to observe one of our lessons? Judge for yourself rather than from rumors." Price hesitated, clearly not expecting this response. "I suppose that would be appropriate." They moved to the garden where several children were already gathered, the usual mix of staff kids and neighborhood children. Amara began the lesson, using falling leaves to explain gravity, acceleration, and air resistance. "Who can tell me why this leaf," she held up a maple leaf, "falls slower than this stone?" Marcus, the gardener's son, raised his hand. "Air resistance. The leaf has more surface area." "Excellent. Now watch this." Amara dropped both items inside a clear tube she created with Emily, then used a vacuum pump to remove the air. Both fell at the same rate. In a vacuum, gravity affects all objects equally. Galileo figured this out without fancy equipment, just by thinking. The children were mesmerized, but Edward watched Price's expression shift from skepticism to reluctant interest. "This isn't standard curriculum," Price said. "No," Amara agreed. "It's better. It connects concepts to reality, makes kids think instead of memorize." After Price left, not convinced but no longer hostile, Edward's phone buzzed with a text from his lawyer. "CPS emergency, hearing tomorrow. Darius filed for immediate custody. He has something." That afternoon, while Edward dealt with lawyers, Emily found her grandmother Margaret in the rose garden, having arrived unannounced as was her way. "Grandmother, why are you here?" Margaret Langston, impeccable as always, turned slowly. "To talk sense into your father, though I suspect it's too late for that." "You mean to make him send Amara away?" "I mean to protect this family from scandal." Emily stood straighter. "Amara is family now." Margaret studied her granddaughter, really looked at her for perhaps the first time in years. "You've changed." Ive grown. There's a difference. Your mother used to say that. She also used to pick up strays, broken people she thought she could fix. Amara isn't broken. She's the strongest person I know. Strength and survival aren't the same thing, child. Aren't they? Emily challenged. You survived grandfather's infidelities. Dad survived mom's death. I survived being invisible in my own home. We're all just using different methods. Margaret's composed mask cracked slightly. You're definitely Patricia's daughter. That evening, as the family prepared for the next day's hearing, Emily made a discovery that changed everything. She'd been looking through her mother's study, a room Edward had left untouched, searching for anything that might help. In a locked drawer, she found correspondence between Patricia and Sadie Okoye. But it wasn't just professional. The letters were personal, warm, speaking of shared dreams for education reform. And in the last letter, dated a week before Patricia's diagnosis, was something stunning. Dad! Emily ran to find him. Look at this. Edward read Patricia's words. Sadie, I've revised my will to ensure your program continues no matter what. The foundation will fund 10 years of the South Side Learning Initiative, with you as director. Our daughter should grow up in a world where zip codes don't determine destinies. She never filed the changes, Edward whispered. She got sick so fast there wasn't time. But this proves Mom wanted to help them, that she believed in what Amara's mom was doing. In her room, Amara held the locket Edward had given her, staring at her mother's photo. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Come in. It was Margaret Langston, the last person Amara expected. Mrs. Langston, I knew your mother, Margaret said without preamble. Not well, but I met her at Foundation events. She was formidable. She was everything, Amara said quietly. Patricia thought so. They'd stay up planning until dawn, driving my son crazy with their schemes to revolutionize education. Margaret sat on the bed, a surprisingly human gesture. Did you know they were planning to start a school together? Amara shook her head. The Okoye Langston Academy for gifted minds. Not just for wealthy children, but for brilliant ones regardless of circumstances. Margaret pulled out a folder she'd been carrying. These are the original plans. I thought they died with Patricia, but watching you teach, perhaps some dreams are just delayed. The courtroom was packed. Word had leaked about the emergency custody hearing, and reporters filled every available seat. Edward sat with his legal team on one side, while Darius occupied the other with lawyers who looked far too expensive for an unemployed man to afford. Judge Catherine Morrison, known for her no-nonsense approach to family law, reviewed the files with a frown. This is highly unusual. Mr. Okoye, you're petitioning for immediate custody of a minor who's been in stable placement. Darius's lawyer, a sharp-dressed man named Richard Sterling, stood. Your Honor, my client has completed rehabilitation, secured employment, and established a stable home. He's been searching desperately for his daughter, who was essentially kidnapped by Mr. Langston. Kidnapped? Edward's lawyer, Janet Chun, objected. The child sought refuge from abuse and neglect. Alleged abuse, Sterling countered. My client admits to struggling with grief after his wife's death, but never harmed his daughter. Then why did she run? Judge Morrison asked directly. Darius stood, tears ready on command. I was broken, Your Honor. Losing Sadie destroyed me. But I've rebuilt my life for Amara. She's all I have left. Amara sat between Edward and Emily, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. Emily reached over, loosening Amara's fingers and holding her hand. Miss Okoye, the judge addressed Amara. You're old enough to speak for yourself. Tell me about your life with your father after your mother's death. Amara stood slowly. After Mama died, everything changed. The man who taught me to ride a bike, who read me stories, he disappeared. Someone else took his place. Someone who saw me as a burden or an asset, never a daughter. Can you be specific? The judge asked gently. The first month, he forgot to buy food. I learned to stretch a loaf of bread for a week. The second month, he didn't pay rent. I learned to pack quickly, quietly. By the third month, he'd started bringing strangers home, telling them I could earn my keep by tutoring their kids for cash he'd pocket. These are lies, Darius interjected. Then explain this. Chen presented evidence. bank records showing Darius's gambling debts, police reports from neighbors about disturbances, medical records showing Amara's malnutrition when she'd appeared at free clinics. Sterling rallied. Your Honor, my client has evidence that Mr. Langston's family is directly responsible for the circumstances that led to Mrs. Okoye's death. The courtroom murmured. Sterling produced documents, the rejected grant application, financial records showing the Okoye family's collapse after funding was cut. Mr. Langston personally signed the rejection that destroyed my client's family, Sterling announced. Now he's trying to steal what's left of it. Edward stood. Your Honor, may I speak? Judge Morrison nodded. I did sign that rejection, Edward admitted. It was 3 days after my wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer. I was not myself. I signed dozens of documents that week without reading them, trusting my board's recommendations. It's my deepest regret. He pulled out Patricia's letters. But my wife believed in the Okoye family. She was working to fund their programs permanently. Her death stopped that, but finding Amara, seeing her brilliant mind, her generous spirit, it's like getting a second chance to honor both Patricia and Sadie's dreams. How touching, Sterling said sarcastically. But guilt doesn't grant custody rights. Dr. Fairfax stood from the gallery. Your Honor, I'm Dr. Nia Fairfax, Professor of Education at Columbia. I've been working with Amara for weeks. May I speak to her capabilities and needs? The judge allowed it. Dr. Fairfax's testimony was powerful, describing Amara's intellectual gifts, her teaching abilities, and the stability she'd found at the Langston estate. This child isn't just gifted, Dr. Fairfax concluded. She's revolutionary. Her teaching methods could transform education, but she needs stability, support, and protection from those who would exploit her gifts. I would never exploit my daughter, Darius shouted. Then explain this. Chen presented new evidence. Phone records showing calls between Darius and Martin Harrow, Edward's business rival. You're being funded by someone with a vendetta against Mr. Langston. The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order. Sterling tried to object, but the evidence was clear. Payment from shell companies linked to Harrow, coaching sessions on what to say in court, even a script for Darius's testimony. Mr. Okoye, Judge Morrison's voice was ice. Are you here for your daughter or a payday? Darius's mask finally slipped. She owes me. After everything I sacrificed. You sacrificed nothing. Amara said quietly but clearly. Mama sacrificed everything. She worked 3 jobs while dying to keep us afloat. You gambled away her life insurance before her body was cold. Emily stood suddenly. Your Honor, I have something to say. The judge looked surprised but nodded. Everyone's talking about Amara, like she's a problem to be solved or a prize to be won. But she's a person. My friend. My teacher. My sister in everything but blood. Emily pulled out her journal. I've documented every lesson, every breakthrough, every moment of joy she's brought not just to me, but to dozens of kids. That's her real value. Not her test scores or her tragic story, but her heart. She walked to the judge, handing over the journal. Read any page. You'll see what really matters. Judge Morrison flipped through the journal, her expression softening. Pages of careful notes, drawings, photos of children learning, laughing, growing. I need time to consider, the judge said finally. But Mr. Okoye, your connection to Mr. Harrow concerns me greatly. Until I can investigate further, Amara remains in her current placement. Outside the courthouse, chaos erupted. Reporters swarmed, shouting questions. Darius pushed through them to confront Edward. This isn't over, he snarled. That girl is mine by blood. Blood doesn't make family, Amara said, standing tall despite her small stature. Love does. Teaching does. Showing up does. You stopped doing all of that long before I ran. Harrow appeared from the crowd, his expression dark. You've made a mistake, Edward. The board votes tomorrow on your leadership. This scandal will bury you. Let them vote, Edward replied. I know what matters now. That evening, back at the estate, an unexpected visitor arrived. A young man in his 20s, clean-cut but nervous. My name is James Walker, he said. I was one of the kids Amara taught under the bridge. I'm in college now, engineering, because she showed me I was smart enough. I heard about the custody fight. He pulled out a folder. 15 of us, all kids she taught on the streets, we wrote letters. Testimony about how she changed our lives. One's a medical school now. Another's teaching kindergarten. She saved us all. Amara broke down crying. The first time anyone had seen her truly cry. Emily and Edward wrapped their arms around her while James continued. We also started a petition. 17,000 signatures so far, demanding she be allowed to continue teaching. She's not just some homeless kid, Mr. Langston. She's a hero to those of us society threw away. Edward's phone buzzed. The board meeting had been moved up. Tonight, in 2 hours. Go, Amara said. Fight for your company. I'd rather stay and fight for you. They're the same fight, Amara said wisely. It's about what we value, profit or people. At Langston Technologies headquarters, the boardroom was tense. Harrow had done his work well. Several members looked ready to vote Edward out. You've lost focus, Harrow argued. This company needs leadership that prioritizes shareholders, not charity cases. Is that what you think Amara is? A charity case? Edward pulled up a presentation. In 6 weeks, she's improved test scores for 12 children by an average of 23%. She's developed teaching methods that 3 universities want to study. She's created more value than any acquisition we've made this year. Value, board member Patricia Steinberg scoffed. She's a 13-year-old girl. So, was Marie Curie when she started self-educating in a Poland that wouldn't let women into universities, Edward countered. So, was Malala when she started fighting for education rights? Age doesn't determine impact. Old Thomas Whitman spoke up. Edward's right. I've watched the footage of this girl teaching. She's extraordinary. And if we fire Edward for recognizing that, we're the fools. The vote was close, too close, but Edward retained his position by 2 votes. As he drove home, Edward's phone rang. It was Judge Morrison. Mr. Langston, I'm calling to inform you that we've discovered something significant. Mr. Harrow has been under SEC investigation for fraud. His involvement with Mr. Okoye constitutes witness tampering. Darius Okoye was arrested an hour ago. Edward pulled over, his hands shaking with relief. Additionally, the judge continued, I'm granting you temporary guardianship of Amara, pending a full review. But Mr. Langston, that child needs more than temporary. She needs permanent. At the estate, Edward found Amara and Emily under the oak tree, teaching a night lesson on constellations to the other children. Look, Amara was saying, every star we see is history. Their light took years to reach us. We're literally looking at the past. Like how our past shapes our present, Emily added. But not our future, Amara continued. That's ours to write. Edward watched them, his daughter and the girl who'd become like a daughter. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The media storm would continue. Harrow would plot revenge. The legal battles weren't over. But tonight, under the oak tree and the stars, children were learning that they were capable of more than they dreamed. And that was worth every fight ahead. The morning of the public forum, Edward stood in his bedroom, adjusting his tie for the 5th time. This wasn't a board meeting or a court hearing. This was something entirely different. He was about to admit his failures to the world. You're nervous, Amara observed from the doorway. Terrified, Edward admitted. I've made presentations to world leaders, but this matters more because it's about truth, not profit. Amara walked in, wearing the simple blue dress Mrs. Patterson had bought her for court. Truth is scary because you can't control how people receive it. On the estate's main lawn, workers had set up hundreds of chairs facing a simple wooden platform. No corporate banners, no branded materials, just a microphone and 3 chairs under the oak trees spreading branches. Emily helped Amara prepare note cards, though they both knew Amara and never needed them. She taught from the heart, not from scripts. Are you ready for this? Emily asked. I've been ready my whole life, Amara replied. I just didn't know it was for this moment. By 2 o'clock, the lawn was packed. Reporters, educators, parents, children from the informal school, homeless advocates, and critics all gathered. Martin Harrow sat in the front row with a contingent of board members, his smile sharp as a blade. Edward stepped to the microphone first. No podium to hide behind, just him and his words. 3 months ago, I found a homeless girl teaching my daughter under that oak tree, he began. My first instinct was to call security. That reaction came from fear. Fear of the different, the unexpected, the uncontrolled. He paused, looking at Amara and Emily sitting together. I've built an empire on control, on prediction, on minimizing variables. But life isn't a spreadsheet. My wife Patricia knew that. She tried to teach me that people aren't problems to be solved, but potential to be nurtured. Edward pulled out a folder. This is the document I signed in 2018, cutting funding to the Okoye Educational Initiative. I signed it 3 days after my wife's diagnosis, when I couldn't see past my own pain. That signature destroyed a family and nearly destroyed a brilliant mind. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Harrow's smile widened. I can't undo that harm, Edward continued, but I can own it. And I could try to honor both Patricia's vision and Sadie Okoye's legacy by supporting the daughter who carries both their dreams. He turned to hand the microphone to Amara, but Harrow stood. How touching, Harrow said loudly. But let's talk about reality. You're asking us to believe a 13-year-old vagrant is qualified to teach? This is sentiment, not sense. Then let me demonstrate sense, Amara said, taking the microphone. Her voice was clear, carrying across the lawn. Mr. Harrow, you run a tech company worth billions. Tell me, what's the primary challenge in quantum computing? Harrow blinked, caught off guard. Error correction in qubits. Correct. Now, imagine I need to explain that to an 8-year-old. Amara turned to Marcus, the gardener's son. Marcus, come here. The boy approached shyly. Amara knelt to his level. You know how when you're trying to balance on your bike, the tiniest wobble can make you fall? Marcus nodded. Quantum computers are like trying to balance thousands of spinning plates at once. Each plate is a piece of information, but they're so delicate that even looking at them can make them wobble. So we need to find ways to check if they're still spinning right without actually looking. We use math, special patterns that tell us if something's wrong without disturbing the plates. Like how I can tell if my bike chain is loose by the sound it makes. Marcus asked. Exactly. Amara stood, facing Harrow. That 8-year-old now understands the fundamental challenge of quantum computing better than most adults. Not because he's a genius, but because I translated complexity into comprehension. Dr. Fairfax stepped forward. If I may, I've been documenting Amara's methods for 6 weeks. Her approach aligns with cutting-edge pedagogical research on contextual learning, but she developed it through necessity, not study. Pretty words, Harrow countered. But can she produce results at scale? Let's ask them. Amara gestured to the audience. Everyone I've taught, please stand. Slowly, people rose. First Emily, then the staff children, then kids from the neighborhood. But more kept standing, teenagers, young adults, even some parents. James Walker, the engineering student, spoke up. She taught me calculus using basketball trajectories when I was 15 and homeless. A woman in scrubs stood. She helped me pass my GED by relating biology to cooking. I'm a nurse now. One by one, they testified, not just about improved grades, but about transformed perspectives, discovered potential, renewed hope. Emily took the microphone. Mr. Harrow, you measure success in stock prices. But look at these faces. Each one is a life changed, a future created. That's the kind of return on investment my mother believed in. Margaret Langston stood, surprising everyone. My daughter-in-law, Patricia, was a dreamer. I thought her naive, but watching this child teach, seeing my granddaughter bloom, perhaps dreamers see what we realists are too frightened to imagine. She pulled out a document. This is my personal pledge. $5 million to establish the Okoye Langston Learning Centers, with Amara as founding consultant and Dr. Fairfax as director. The crowd erupted. Harrow's smile finally faltered. This is ridiculous, he started. No, Thomas Whitman interrupted, standing with difficulty but with determination. What's ridiculous is how we've confused credentials with capability. This girl has more teaching talent than professors I've endowed chairs for. Edward took back the microphone. We're not asking anyone to believe blindly. We're starting with one center, here on the estate grounds. Free education for any child who needs it. If it fails, I'll resign from my position and sell my shares. And when it succeeds, a reporter called out, then we build more. In every neighborhood that needs them. Harrow stood to leave, but turned back. You're destroying everything your father built, Edward. No, Edward replied. I'm building what he never could. A legacy measured in lives, not dollars. As Harrow stormed off, a commotion erupted near the garden gates. Darius Okoye, out on bail, pushed through the crowd. That's my daughter, he shouted, clearly intoxicated despite his bail conditions. You rich people think you can buy anything, even children. Security moved to intercept him, but Amara raised her hand, stopping them. She walked toward her father, each step deliberate. Hello, Daddy, she said softly. Don't you daddy me. You humiliated me in court. Your own father. The man who was my father would never have sold Mama's books. Would never have forgotten me at the hospital. Would never have brought strangers home and suggested I earn my keep. Darius raised his hand as if to strike her. Edward and several others moved forward, but Amara didn't flinch. Go ahead, she said. Hit me in front of all these cameras. Show everyone who you really are. Darius's hand trembled, then dropped. You're just like her. Your mother. Too good for the rest of us. Mama wasn't too good for anyone. She saw good in everyone, even you, long after it disappeared. Amara reached into her pocket, pulling out the locket. She loved you once. The man you were. I mourn him like I mourn her. I'm still your father. Biology doesn't make a father. Love does. Protection does. Showing up does. Amara looked back at Edward. I've learned that recently. Darius lunged forward, grabbing for the locket. That's mine. She was mine. This time security did intervene, pulling him back as he struggled and cursed. Mr. Okie, Judge Morrison appeared from the crowd. She'd come to observe. You just violated your bail conditions. Officers. As police led Darius away, he screamed, This isn't over. You're my blood, and on my mother's mind, Amara replied. That matters more. 6 weeks later, the courtroom was packed again, but the atmosphere was different. Hopeful rather than hostile. Judge Morrison reviewed the thick file before her. This is one of the most unusual cases I've overseen. Miss Okoye, you're 13 years old, but you've shown maturity beyond your years. Mr. Langston, you began as a stranger to this child, yet you've provided more stability than her biological family. She looked at the reports from Dr. Fairfax, the testimonials from dozens of children and parents, the psychological evaluations. Mr. Okoye's parental rights have been terminated due to abandonment, neglect, and endangerment. The question now is your future, Amara. Edward stood. Your Honor, Emily and I would like to formally petition for permanent guardianship of Amara. Not adoption. That's Amara's choice to make when she's ready. For now, we want to offer her a home, family, and future without erasing her past. Judge Morrison turned to Amara. Is this what you want? Amara stood, Emily beside her holding her hand. Your Honor, I've learned that family isn't just about blood or even law. It's about choosing each other every day. The Langstons chose me when I had nothing to offer but knowledge. I choose them because they see me not as a project or property, but as a person. Then it's my pleasure to grant permanent guardianship to Edward Langston, with Dr. Nia Fairfax as educational guardian and advocate. The judge smiled. Court is adjourned. The courtroom erupted in celebration. Emily hugged Amara, so tight she couldn't breathe. Edward wrapped his arms around both girls, and for a moment, the three of them stood there, an unlikely family forged by chance and choice. Later that evening, Edward found a letter in Patricia's study that Margaret had left for him. My dear Edward, if you're reading this, then you've finally found what I always knew was in you. The ability to love beyond logic. Amara isn't just a girl you're helping. She's the bridge between the world we inherited and the one we should build. Love her, as I would have. Love them both. P. 3 months later, the first Under the Oak Learning Center officially opened. The building was simple but beautiful. Glass walls to let in light, flexible spaces for different learning styles, and yes, an oak tree in the central courtyard. The opening ceremony drew hundreds. The mayor spoke, educators from around the country attended, and media coverage was overwhelmingly positive. But the most important attendees were the 43 children enrolled in the first session. Kids from shelters, struggling students from public schools, brilliant minds trapped in poverty. Amara stood before them, not as a teacher exactly. She was still too young for certification, but as the lead peer mentor and curriculum designer. "Welcome to a place where questions matter more than answers," she began. "Where mistakes are just lessons waiting to be learned. Where your background doesn't determine your future." Emily stood beside her as assistant mentor, having developed her own gift for teaching through Amara's example. "We're going to learn together," Emily added. "Math through music, science through art, history through our own stories." Edward watched from the back with Dr. Fairfax and Margaret. His mother had become an unexpected ally. Her initial prejudice transformed into fierce protectiveness of both girls. "You did good, son," Margaret said quietly. "They did good," Edward corrected. "I just got out of the way." 6 months in, the program had expanded to 3 locations. The test scores were impressive, but more important were the stories. Marcus, the gardener's son with dyslexia, was reading above grade level and teaching other kids with learning differences. Sarah, the shy kitchen worker's daughter, had started a science club at her school and won the district science fair. James Walker graduated engineering school and returned to teach mathematics at the center. Even more surprising was Darius's transformation. After 6 months in prison and mandatory rehab, he sent a letter, not asking for forgiveness, but offering acknowledgement. "I broke when Sadie died. Broke bad and hurt the one good thing we created together. I can't undo that, but I can stay away and let her become who she's meant to be. Tell her I remember the man I was when her mother loved me. Maybe someday I could be someone worth remembering again." Amara read it once, then placed it in a box with her mother's things. "Maybe," she said, "healing isn't linear." A year later, at the annual Foundation Gala, held under tents on the lawn rather than in a hotel, Harrow appeared. His company had faltered after the SEC investigation exposed fraudulent practices. He stood at the edge of the celebration, watching. Edward approached him. "Martin, I came to see if it was real," Harrow said. "This transformation of yours. It's not mine. It's theirs." Edward gestured to where Amara and Emily were teaching a group of donors' children to juggle while explaining the physics of motion. "I was wrong," Harrow said quietly. "I thought strength meant never changing. But watching you risk everything for that girl, that's actual courage. She risked more. She chose to trust after every reason not to." Harrow nodded and left, but the next day, an anonymous donation of $2 million arrived for the learning centers. The speech Amara gave that night became legendary, shared millions of times online. "They call me a success story, but I'm not successful because I escaped poverty. I'm successful because poverty taught me that brilliance exists everywhere, in homeless camps, in struggling schools, in places society ignores. We don't need to save these kids. We need to see them, teach them, and learn from them. Every child under every oak tree deserves the chance to grow tall." 5 years later, at Amara's high school graduation, she completed it at 15. She stood as valedictorian. The audience included hundreds of kids she taught, all wearing oak leaf pins. "Education isn't about climbing ladders," she said in her speech. "It's about building bridges. Thank you to everyone who built bridges for me and with me." She looked at Edward and Emily in the front row. Emily, now 16, had become a teaching prodigy in her own right, developing innovative methods for special needs children. "Special thanks to my family," Amara continued. "Not the one I was born into, but the one that chose me, challenged me, and changed me. Mr. Langston, Dad, you showed me that mistakes can become miracles if we're brave enough to face them. Emily, sister, you showed me that privilege can be a tool for justice if wielded with wisdom." Edward wiped away tears, not caring who saw. Patricia would have been so proud. After the ceremony, under the original oak tree, 3 generations gathered. Margaret, Edward, Emily, and Amara, joined by Dr. Fairfax and dozens of students and teachers. "What's next?" Emily asked Amara. "College, but part-time. I want to keep teaching, keep building. The centers are in 12 cities now, but there are thousands more that need them. We could go faster with more corporate partners, Edward suggested. Maybe, Amara said, but growing right matters more than growing fast. Each center needs its own oak tree, literal or metaphorical. Something rooted, something that will outlast us. That night, Amara found a new letter in her room, this one from Emily. Sister, because that's what you are, no matter what any paper says. 5 years ago you sat under our oak tree and changed our lives. You taught me math and science, but more importantly, you taught me to see, really see, the world and my place in it. Thank you for choosing us when you had every reason to run. Thank you for teaching me that family is a verb, not just a noun. Love always, Emily. The final scene happened months later at the opening of the 100th Under the Oak Learning Center, this one in the neighborhood where Amara had once slept under bridges. Darius appeared, sober for 2 years, working as a counselor at a recovery center. He didn't approach, just stood at the back. Amara saw him and walked over. Hello. I didn't come to disrupt. I just wanted to see what you built. We built. Every broken thing taught me to build better. Your mother would be proud. She's here. Amara touched her chest. In every lesson I teach, every child who discovers they're brilliant. Could I ever be forgiven? Forgiveness isn't mine to give or withhold. But redemption? That's yours to build, one day at a time. She left him with an application. We need counselors who understand breaking and rebuilding. Think about it. As the ceremony began, Amara stood before the crowd. Now Dr. Fairfax's co-director, despite being only 18. The oak tree behind her was young, but growing strong. Every child is a seed, she began. Some get planted in rich soil, others in cracks in concrete. But seeds are miraculous. They'll grow wherever they can, reaching for light. Our job isn't to replant them, but to make sure they have what they need where they are. The camera pulled back, showing hundreds of people, children, parents, teachers, former students now teaching others. In the crowd, Edward and Emily stood together, Margaret beside them, all wearing oak leaf pins. The final shot, the original oak tree at the Langston estate, now surrounded by a full campus of learning buildings. Children of every background played and learned beneath its branches. Carved carefully into its trunk, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. For Sadie and Patricia, who planted seeds in concrete and trusted them to grow. The end card reads, the Under the Oak Learning Centers now operate in 200 cities, serving over 100,000 children annually. Every center is free, and every teacher starts as a student. Because the best education doesn't just change minds, it changes lives, then changes the world. If you had the power to change a life, but it meant admitting you destroyed one first, would you have the courage to face that truth? Share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more stories that challenge us to see beyond what divides us.